Hi, my name is Lydia Fayal Hall. I am at Workstream, and today we are joined with Greg, who is a VP of Operation for Cinnabon, as well as many other QSRs, including Auntie Anne's. And we wanted to chat with you today about what you're doing right now for hiring, how things have changed in the past few months, and also just some of your learnings over the 50 years that you've been in the food and beverage industry. So thank you so much for joining us today, Greg.
My pleasure.
So I guess to start off, over your long career, what have been some of the biggest changes you've seen just from how sort of what's expected of the operation and managers and sort of what, you would have never anticipated? What were some of the biggest changes over the last 50 years?
Oh, well, you're asking me to go back a ways, but it's a completely different environment now. The difference in the generations of people that we hire. Each generation has its own idiosyncrasies and the best way to get them to perform. A lot of our employees now are millennials, which I happen to really like millennials. I think they're a fantastic group to work with as long as you can build the trust with them. When I started as a busboy 50 years ago, it was kind of like just do what you're told and shut up. And now employees require a lot more trust building, but if you can build that trust with them, they really respond.
And how do you build that? How do you build trust with millennials?
You first have to take an interest in them, a genuine interest. They can sniff out someone who's not interested and just doing it because someone told them to. They can sniff that out very quickly. They're very, very highly intelligent, and they really want to learn. So if you can kind of build that trust by finding out about them, taking a genuine interest in them, not only on the work side, but getting to know them on the personal side, not building a friendship, but much more of a mentorship. They are hungry for that real world experience, and they respond very well to it. Also, they do not like to be talked down to. They like to be talked on the same level, even if their experience doesn't match that. They respond very, very well to a lot of praise, and not so much to the criticism that I grew up with, which we just kind of figured was the way the world went. So those two things are the most critical, is to take a genuine interest, be honest with them, and really guide them. Those things really go a long way.
Now, the last time Workstream and we spoke with you, Greg, we had the opportunity to chat with you about the text to apply posters and what you were doing with text messaging. How are you seeing that work with the millennial crowd? What has been the response with that, and sort of what channels of communication seem to be working best with millennials?
Well, we had used another platform prior to Workstream, and they did not have the text to apply. And I really wasn't that interested in switching. Kind of got on a call with Desmond and was more of just being polite. And then I was going to kind of say, okay, thank you. And hopefully that would go away. But once he started talking about the text to apply function or feature, that really caught my mind. And then I started really listening to what he had to say. So the text to apply has really been something that is been very helpful to us, especially when we were open. Being in California, we have no stores open right now for the second time. But having them just be able to walk in, before we had so many ways. Some managers had applications handy, some didn't, some wrote it down on a scrap of paper, and then nothing ever happened. So now with the text to apply, we have a big poster in each of our stores, nice Cinnabon, a picture of someone making Cinnabon. It's probably about 2 by 3 feet, framed, looks real nice. And down at the bottom, it says text to apply. And so if someone walks into the store and looking for a job, the manager just points them to the sign, and then it goes into the queue, and the manager can review those applicants when they're looking for it. And that simple method seems to be something that really works well, especially for millennials who are, as you can tell, far better at using a phone and all these functions than I am.
No, you're great. And since stores have been closed, are there any other methods that you've been considering with when you want to reopen, where you're going to get new hires from?
Well, that's probably one of the biggest challenges right now, because being in California, where the minimum wage, the standard unemployment benefits were $450, adding with the $600 for the federal that ended last weekend. That was bringing most of them to much more than what they were making. So when we went to reopen, we did have a lot of challenges. We reopened after about 3 months, and we're open for a month, only to be shut down again. Oh, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, 2 or 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I can't remember. But so it was difficult getting a lot of employees back. We had one store that opened, and it's our busiest store, and then there was a COVID outbreak amongst the employees. One employee got it, everyone else was afraid to work. So we had to close down for 4 days till we could restaff, because we only had 2 people that were willing to work. So one of the other features that really worked with Workstream was the number of job boards that they post to. There've been a lot of crisis situations, not a lot, but a few crisis situations over the past year and a quarter that we've used Workstream, where if we put an ad on the job boards, it goes to so many that we get quite a few applicants very quickly. We had one incident up in over the holidays in one of our stores where unfortunately we had to terminate most of the crew, and I think I put an ad in at 8:30 at night, and the next morning I had 34 applicants.
Oh, wow.
Screened those, and within 2 days we had 8 new people that we were training. So that got us through that jam. In this case, where we had to close down, it was normally a store that we had no trouble hiring with, but because people were used to getting a lot of money from not working, I had to jump up the starting wage. The starting wage at this store was $13 an hour, and I had to bump that up to $15 an hour. I ran an ad at the $13 an hour, and it just got no traction. As soon as I bumped it up to $15 an hour, within a couple of days, I had I think like 59 applicants.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and where do you sort of highlight how much you're paying per hour in your ads? Do you put it in the actual post?
Right in these cases where I needed someone very quickly, I did it right in the header instead of just saying crew member or something like that. I think I came up with something because Cinnabon is sweet, so I said sweet deal, $15 an hour or something like that. So that prompted a lot of people to, I think it was sweet deal for sweet crew members, $15 an hour. And that got a lot of traction. I think because we were really, one of the people that got the COVID at that store was the store manager. So I screened all of the new applicants on the phone myself. I think I had set up like 15, 16 interviews, and we made 5 new hires. Plus, when some of the other employees found out, they wanted to know if I would pay them $15 to come back. And I said, of course, you've been with us a long time. I wouldn't start someone new at more than you're making. So we had about 5 or 6 of them come back, because now $15 instead of $13, they miraculously were cured and are not afraid anymore. And so we were able to reopen within 4 days. I think we closed down on a Monday. We were open Friday, only to be closed again 4 days later on Monday when the governor reclosed California. So it's been a real battle.
It's a roller coaster. And, when you have to sort of navigate that with your staff, the reopening and closing, how do you sort of decide between furloughing? How do you communicate sort of what your expectations are for people coming back and stay in touch with employees?
We use another like a group communication platform. It's GroupMe. I'm sure people have heard of that before, where we post only positive things. We've used that for years. And so people were used to seeing that. Even while we were closed, I used to forbid any personal stuff on there, but while we were closed, I said, let's get to know each other. What are you doing right now? What are your hobbies? Take some pictures. So we had a lot of people staying in touch via that. So that went a long way to keeping the team intact. We have 14 locations, and they kind of run the gamut in California, from Santa Rosa down to El Centro, which is 650 miles in between the northern and southernmost stores. So this has always kind of kept us together as a group. When anyone does anything good or gets some recognition, we always put it on there with pictures. So someone in Santa Rosa will know if someone that way down in El Centro happened to do something well. And so that worked well for us. So communicating via that method, and then staying in touch while we were closed for 3 months, helped keep people wanting to be part of the team. So when we reopened, it really was easier than I thought it was going to be to get people willing to come back. We did have, like I mentioned, some problems around that. Some people were reluctant because they were making more on unemployment, not working, than they were working. But I was surprised at the number that actually did come back. And these people came back with a whole new situation they had to face, because there was tons of new things that they had to be trained on, especially around PPE. How do you, what are our new sanitation requirements? What changes in the stores were being made? So especially to the service end, having only one register open instead of two, trying to maintain social distancing, sanitizing efforts throughout the shifts and the day. All the malls also had reduced operating hours. We're, as you know, Cinnabon and Auntie Anne's all basically mall-based. So, there was 3 hours a day less operations. Instead of 10 to 9, it was 11 to 7 in all the malls. So it was really challenging on a lot of fronts. And I have to say that people overall, our staffs, they did pretty well. I think they came back with a little bit of reluctance, but I think they were sad when the state closed us down again.
Yeah.
Especially now, since that $600 is gone, and now they're just existing on nothing.
Yeah, it's hard. They don't even get the, free Cinnabon, yeah, I mean, that alone would keep me going in. So, with employees having to sort of decide between unemployment benefits there and coming back and getting paid, what would you say was the easiest way to sort of reach out and communicate with them about why you wanted to rehire them or talk to them? Were you using the messaging app directly, text message? Were you calling people?
Yeah, in most cases, it was the managers who were getting on the phone with their employees. And what we found was that the managers who stayed in touch with their employees, either personally or on the GroupMe, were the ones that had the least trouble getting people back. The ones that kind of just had forgotten about their employees, they had the most trouble. So that personal touch of staying in contact with people during the time we were closed really proved to be, oops, there I go again. Really proved to be very beneficial.
And, you talk a lot about the retraining and all the additional sort of protocols you had to implement. What % of your employees do you think were able to just get it day one and keep going versus those that need to, do a lot more training, a lot more reminders? What % were able to pick up the new training quickly?
The training part they picked up quickly. The ability or the desire to put it into place and to practice it varied from location to location. And that was primarily, the stores that have our better managers in it, they had the least amount of trouble getting people on board with it.
So it sounds like it really comes down to the managers. It's
Definitely.
I always I love the saying it's their what is it? No bad employees. They're just bad hires and bad managers.
That's very true. The managers, and we've gone through, since the 4 years that I've been with Cinnabon, in the Cinnabon family, 2 different owners. That has proved to be so very true.
And before this,
the personal touch is much more important than it was when I was there, when I was first coming up 50 years ago. Even back then, it worked, but it wasn't expected. Now it's expected. If you're not doing that, you're going to have a tough time motivating people.
Yeah. And how do you incorporate the personal touch into the actual application process when you think about sort of the follow-up messages and what you're doing there?
That has been something that has worked well in other stores. Again, when you have the better managers, they will follow through, follow up, and actually get once they make the hire, get the person in to fill out all the necessary paperwork, which is done online through our payroll service. A lot of the managers, not a lot, but the managers who aren't as on top of it and cognizant of this fact, those people would, need some people, they'd call them up, and the person might never hear from them, and they keep bugging them. And then they would say, oh, go to this place and apply, and they'd rely on them. And the potential applicant or the applicant potential employee would really get frustrated, and the hire wasn't made. So again, it's that personal touch, showing the person, even the applicant who's not an employee yet, that you care, is like almost, I don't know how you do it without it these days. So that's where most of my coaching with our managers has come into place, and with my DMs, that's where all that has really gone to. When I see that that's not being done, I have some other managers who have no trouble, and I can use them as an example. And I said, this person has an easy life compared to your life, because of the way that they are really treating their employees and prospective employees.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We had a question come in. Do you do anything to build your proactive hiring pipeline?
We were, before this started, we were doing a lot. And one of the features in Workstream, I don't know if most of the people on here are customers of Workstream or not, but I can go in, and part of my weekly routine was to go in once a week, and I can pull up and see who is using Workstream. And if there's a manager who the crew is fairly stable, then and they're reluctant to be proactive, I can see they think they have a staff that's set and in place, and I pull it up, and they haven't even gone into Workstream for 2 weeks. So I can quickly get on the phone, either myself personally or through my DMs, and have them, coach them on how to use it. So number one, they know that I'm looking, and the ones who are actively involved with this process, where I can go in and they've gone in, I can see they've gone in 2 days ago, and they're looking for people. These stores have the better staff, and they're never understaffed. The ones who only go into Workstream and check when they need an employee are the ones that are always in a bind with keeping their staff at an adequate level. So that feature has been really helpful to me in pushing them to maintain a proactive approach to their hiring practices. If they say, oh no, my crew's set, and then I look at different things such as their customer comments and the different reports that we have that Cinnabon provides for us. And I can quickly show them your staff isn't as good as you think. You need to really start recruiting for more.
How do you measure staff performance? And is there any way that you do that as far as an ROI with financials and the impact there for staffing?
We don't. One of the things been on my to-do list. We had an ownership change about a little over 2 years ago, and we've had so many different changes. And I used to measure that pretty religiously, but that just hasn't been something that I've been able to get back in and measure as far as what your return is. All that I know is that high turnover is expensive, just from that standpoint alone, not to mention the ancillary effects of those are not the best running stores and not the most profitable stores.
Makes a lot of sense. Another question that came in, are you relying on job postings to fill your full and short-term shifts?
We change up our posts about 4 times a year unless there's a need. In some of those emergency situations, we've had to turn one off and put a new one on. But we typically gear up for more hiring, right? We usually start around the end of September, 1st of October for the holiday period. Being mall-based, we do, I think some stores about 40% of our business during the holiday periods.
Oh, wow.
So it goes from, our busiest store will go from 26,000 a week to almost 65,000 a week. So it's just huge, the amount of difference that's there. So we have to do quite a bit of hiring. So we switch those up about 4 times a year, depending on the season, unless we have a specific need to really do some emergency hires.
Cool. Another question that came in, are there any interview questions you've used past or present that you feel are absolutely essential in helping you hire managers, helping your hiring managers assess a candidate?
We have built the questions into the application process in Workzoom, and those are very simple questions. What days, what is your availability? And then it lists the 7 days, and they can click on each day they're available. Obviously, in our business, nights and weekends and holidays are critical. So if they're putting down 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, obviously they get rejected right away. The other ones are, we do have one piece of equipment in most of our bakeries where you have to be over 18 by California law to operate. So we want to make sure we have a good mix of legal adults that can operate some of the machinery, and they're not limited to what they can do. We do hire some under 18 that can just serve as other functions, mostly around customer service and cleaning and stuff like that. Obviously, the standard question, are you legally allowed to work? So those questions really pare down the selection pool right away, but it gets us to more people that we know are going to be available when we need them. And then once we've chosen to do a phone screen, the phone screen is really very, very quick, and it's mainly to see that those questions are correct and to really make sure that they're available on those times. And then we ask a couple questions like, how do you think you're going to get to work? Real quick questions. But the main purpose of the phone screen is, how does this person sound? Does this person have an energy to them? Does their voice have an energy? Do they sound like they're dead? How are they responding to me personally on the phone or whoever's calling them? And then we'll set up the in-person interview. And once the in-person interview is set up, then it's, these are entry-level jobs, so they're not, we're not hiring for a 6-figure income. So the in-person interview is not that long. We ask them a few questions, especially if they had previous work experience, and based around specifics, train the managers to ask about specific instances rather than ask general questions or questions that they can give you a textbook answer to. And you can really kind of get a feel for a person good by how they relate to you during that interview period. And the store we recently had to do the hiring at, I don't know how they did the phone screens. I live in Southern California. This was in Central California. So I drove up to do the interviews myself because we had to get the people ready to reopen and everything. And they were busy with those production and service type functions. So I hadn't done that for a while, so I had to reach way back in, but just really quickly asking them some specific questions. And the specific questions prevent them from giving you textbook answers or just yes and no answers or answers they think that you want to hear. And a lot of times when I ask them specifics, you can see them kind of go, oh, they had to think. If it's the first time, if it's their first job, you ask them about, if they're in any organizations in their school, if they're playing sports, how do you, tell me about a specific time you had a problem with one of your teammates, things like that. So those questions get in and kind of can give me a good idea if they're the right person to hire, and that's how I instruct the managers to do the interviews, and that's worked fairly well for us.
Yeah, and I realize you aren't doing most of the hiring interviews yourself. You have managers to do that, but you talked about before Workstream, you were using something else, and you've been in this business a long time. What would you say were the standard sort of no-show and no-answer rates before you were using Workstream to schedule things? So like when you called or were trying to get people to show up, like what percentage of people just flaked or never answered their phone?
It was probably about 65 to 70% that didn't answer or flaked. Right now, when I did the most recent ones, it was probably about only 40% who didn't answer or didn't. If they didn't answer, I left a voicemail just telling them if they're interested, please call me. And I had quite a few people that didn't answer their phone, but did call back, much more so than we used before. So I was very glad we made the change to Workstream, and the staff there was very helpful in helping us get started on it. Aaron was just super.
Oh, Aaron's the best.
Yeah. So.
When it comes,
he paid me to say that.
Oh, okay. Did he? Yeah. I'm sure, and you've probably repaid him in plenty of Cinnabons. I feel like he's an addict. So another question that came in, how has Workstream helped with reducing in-person ghosting? So if people are actually scheduled to come in for an interview, what percent of people used to flake, and what percent of people like still flake? I guess separate from like what's going on with COVID, what would you say were like before Workstream and now using Workstream to send like the automated reminders and whatnot?
That really varies a lot by store and geographic location. We still have a problem with people actually showing up for the interview, but we had a problem before. But and I don't remember how many, but it was quite a few who didn't show up before. And we probably have about 70 to 75% of the people who actually schedule an interview actually show up. But we do have some locations where maybe only about 20% show up.
Oh, wow. Another question.
Those have always been tough places to hire in.
What makes them tough places to hire?
I think mostly it's demographics. We have some in very, very affluent areas where maybe mom or dad is on their case to get a job, and they just tell their parents, oh, there's just nothing out there. and the parents believe them. But
I
so
have a
there's
sibling who skated by like that for years.
the two they're on both those areas are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's the same on both. If you have a very low demographic area, economic area, it's more like they really don't want to work, and so they do anything they can not to. And in the affluent areas, it's pretty much the same thing. They have a good life, and they don't see any need to go to work.
Yeah.
The primarily blue collar areas that we're located in have always been the easiest places to hire, and where we get some really decent people.
Well, I appreciate, people with good work ethics. My first job was bussing tables. So I feel like, it's a necessity. Just like, just got to start in the restaurant business and, roll up your sleeves, get your hands dirty. A question that came in, could you clarify what's different regarding people responding when you're using Workstream versus other methods that they come in through?
I think the main thing is the way that the Workstream software works, or platform, whatever you want to call it.
We don't even know. You're good.
It kind of guides the manager along, and I can see where they're at. When I can go in a review, I can see how many people have applied, how many people have actually been contacted. Sometimes the manager doesn't move them along in the steps, and then if I say, you had all these people applying, you haven't contacted any, it's like, oh yeah, I contacted these people. Well, you didn't move them along then, or you didn't reject them. So it's more of an awareness issue, that I have a tool that I can follow up on and keep that at the top of mind awareness, that we always need to be recruiting. And just that continued emphasis on it. A lot of people in not only this business, but other businesses, they think that just because they proclaim something, it's going to happen magically. And it doesn't. It's only through constant repetition and constant follow-up does it really impact an organization. So the managers have gotten more clear now that they need to continually be recruiting. And the place where Workstream comes in is that it makes it much easier and quicker for me to go in and spot check, so that then I can address issues right on the spot with a phone call from myself or from the DM as to, what is the issue here. If I have a real problem, obviously a phone call from myself gets their attention a lot quicker.
Yeah. Well, you're an important person, so that makes sense. And, with turnover as high as, it's like pre-COVID, just like what it was before. I know Panera Bread's CFO was on CNBC, and he said like the industry standard is 130%, and they were like proud that they were at 100%. What do you think, sort of with, a lot of mall-based QSRs, like with Cinnabon, with Auntie Anne's, what are the turnover rates? And turnover rate obviously being calculated with, okay, if you need 10 people to operate this location, how many people are you hiring every year? So if you have to hire 20 people in a given year, like that would be a 200% turnover rate. What would you say that the turnover rate is for these mall-based locations?
Again, that's so dependent on the area, and even more so on the manager.
What would you say the highest and lowest is?
So I would say, I know that I have 2 stores where the turnover rate is continually between 25 and 30%. And then I have other stores where it has been as high as 200%.
Wow.
So it's really indicative of the manager. And it just goes back to the premise that today's managers have to be much more employee-centered, rather than just a dictator or someone who's going to sit in the office. They have to be right in there with them. And where we have that managers that show that genuine concern for their employees is where we have low turnover rates. And it really doesn't have much to do with, I mean, it has some to do with the pay, but it has more to do with how they're treated.
And how do you look for managers who are going to treat employees really well? Are there any questions that you ask in the interview or back channeling to understand, like, this is going to be somebody who's going to make my life easier because they're going to be a good manager?
One of the things I like to ask the manager is, you know, you probably had one employee who kind of sticks in your mind, one or two maybe, and tell me why they stick in your mind. And usually that'll lead to, well, you know, I promoted them to crew leader and then to assistant, and now they're running this store, or what. And that's one of the things I would ask them. A follow-up question would be, so what specifically did you do to help with this person's success? And if I get a real unspecific answer, I know it's probably not a strong part of theirs. But if they can give me a real specific answer and or that's almost like bragging about this employee, then I know that this person has some experience in this and probably is more likely to be successful at this than someone who kind of hums and haws and takes a while to answer the question.
It's fair. I always like that, you know, the STAR, the situational, there's situation, task, action, response, I think is how they.
And then a result.
Yeah, or results. Yeah, sorry. You know, if only everyone would get that beforehand.
Well, it goes back, I don't even remember when in my career, but that's one of the things that's stuck with me.
Yeah.
It's like some things are true then and they don't change.
They really don't. One thing that has changed that's been talked about a lot in the news, and somebody asked this in the chat, is what are you guys doing in your own business to promote diversity and create opportunities for advancement? I think this is something, you know, a lot of QSRs are talking about right now, but is there anything that you guys are actively doing to promote diversity and create opportunities for advancement?
Well, diversity is, you know, Southern California, we get quite a few applicants just because of the general ethnic makeup of California. We get quite a few Hispanics that apply. And trying to diversify the workforce is not as easy as it sounds, but we do make an effort to make sure that we can be more inclusive now, especially within the last few months. It becomes more and more important to have a more diverse workforce. And so that's a challenge right now, is to diversifying the workforce when you have a work population that is very highly in one ethnic group. So we are really pushing, especially based on what the overall demographics of each individual geographic location is, to have a workforce that more mirrors the general population of the area. But that's not as easy. It's not as easy as it sounds, but we're trying to make big inroads into that area. We have one location that's not in an amusement park, but it's in a mall related to the amusement park, where we get people from all over the world. And I've always wanted to have like a mini United Nations employed there. Never quite got to that, but that would be my dream, is so that anybody from any place in the world could come in and feel comfortable. One of the funnest stores to work at. I have a kick working there because I get to meet people from all over and talk to them about where they're from and why they're here. So that's a lot of fun.
Which park is it?
What?
Is it which?
Universal Studios in Hollywood. We have one.
Fun. I'm a big like roller coaster fan. So yeah, next time.
There's a mall out front called Universal City Walk, and it's kind of a fun place.
That sounds awesome. We have a few more questions to get through. I feel like we're over time, but I just want to sort of knock out the questions that people have submitted. One of them, you kind of touched on this earlier, but what aspects of hiring have become more difficult as a result of the pandemic? Is there anything that, separate from what you discussed earlier about just the unemployment benefits being higher? Are there any things, I mean, you have a text to apply poster, but you have less traffic. Sort of, does that make it more difficult? Are there any other things you've had to change?
Even though there's been less foot traffic, the number that have come in through text to apply hasn't proportionally really changed. So we still have a good amount that come in through there, but having to place new ads has really been something we've had to do, especially in certain locations where we needed to do a lot of emergency hiring.
Is it harder to hire when all of the businesses in your area are trying to reopen at the same time?
I thought it would be. It's not as hard as I thought it was going to be.
That's because
there's got to be all these people who are opening, looking for people, but it hasn't been that difficult, especially since we've had those emergency situations where we've had to do a lot of quick hiring. But we did offer more money, so that might have helped.
That always helps. I mean, doesn't make dollars, doesn't make sense, sort of.
No one likes to increase their costs, but California, the minimum wage is 13, but there's so many municipalities and counties where they've upped that. And even in areas where it's not mandated to pay higher, there's a local area that might be paying higher, where they could go a few miles and make more. So our overall average hourly rate in our stores is, I think the last payroll was about $16.35. So because we're having to pay more, even though the minimum wage is not that high, we've had to pay more to really attract the quality person and to get a steady stream of applicants coming in.
Another question that came in for hard to fill positions, I suppose like managers, where you just aren't getting enough good applicants. Do you ever use temp agencies or sign-on bonuses?
No, we have an employee referral plan. It's quite generous, where if an employee hires someone and we hire them through that employee referral, they will get $100 after 30 days. And then if the employee stays around 90 days, they get another 200. So that's $300 they can make from referring someone who's going to stick with us and is good.
In the news, there was a lot of sort of big splash, maybe this was 6 months ago, of Taco Bell announcing that it was going to pay its managers $100,000 and In-N-Out coming out saying like, oh, we already do that. What? I
said In-N-Out has paid their people very well. They've always been amongst the highest, even in what they pay their hourly people.
Is it when Taco Bell came out with that, as far as like their $100,000 managers, were you shocked by that, or is that just, do you think it's what do you think that's a reflection of? I suppose, is it that hard to hire for like a company like Taco Bell? And I guess, you come not just from Cinnabon, but also from KFC. Like, how have you seen these sort of different franchises like struggle for certain types of talent?
I think to get someone in, you have to have an attractive package for them. I'm not sure where we rate. Our average general manager is probably around 50,000 base, but we have implemented a bonus program to where the manager can earn more. And I'm sure that the numbers Taco Bell are bragging about is a base plus incentive salary bonus incentive. And those numbers where they're talking about 100,000, I'm sure, are more with their higher volume units. We've really been looking at that a lot. Another thing that's very important too is the managers have to have some kind of quality of life. And that was something that when I was a store manager years ago, we were just expected to work all the time, didn't matter.
I
But
think
now
I'm expected to work all the time, no matter what. So I'm like,
well, it hasn't changed for me yet, but I'm old, I can't change. But I have to really be cognizant when I'm looking for new people is, what is this person looking for? And if I think this person's really good, and even with my existing managers, my DMs, I want them to take Sundays off because they need to be in the stores when it's busy on weekends, but they don't have to be on Sunday. So I try to encourage them to take Sundays off. So they have some time when maybe their family is more likely to be off too. And even with the store managers, it used to be, nope, you don't take, in the old days, used to be, nope, you don't take weekends off. Now it's like, if you need a weekend off or a weekend day off, I just got to know ahead of time, and we review the schedules every week. But I would like to be able to give the managers, at least one weekend off a week. And in stores where they're staffing as well, they have adequate backup. Their management staff, meaning assistant manager and the crew leaders is there. I encourage those managers to take a 3-day weekend every month, so that they have that time with whatever family situation they might be involved with.
that's great.
So it's much more important now for for that quality of life issue is becoming very, very important. We used to mandate that the managers work, when the store is busy at night, and that's not as big a thing with me anymore, because if they can develop their key people, their assistant managers and their crew leaders, then that's fine with me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think it's, it's just building trust across like all the different types of people you work with. So I want to knock out the last few questions since we're over time. One of the questions is, since you have a lot of shops in malls, how do you stay informed when they are going to open and close? How fast does it take you to ramp up your store when you know they're going to reopen?
Yeah, that's really been tricky, because sometimes we got like a day's notice that the mall was opening. We can ramp up in about 2 days, depending on when our main delivery is. So we need supplies, a lot of spoilage during the 3-month closure, where we had to make sure we had enough, and stores that might be near the distribution center could always do a will call, but you can only transport so much in a car. So it depended. We could open it as quick as 2 days, and sometimes it took like 3 or 4, just depending on the delivery schedule. So the malls, it's not really their fault, because a lot of times they don't even know when they're going to open. So much depends on when they're allowed to open, and then these malls all have corporate offices. So by the time the GM finds out, he might be, oh, we're opening on, it's Monday, we're opening Wednesday. Right now, the state of California is publishing, they have what they call a watch list by county, where they have specific criteria to when they will allow, whether they consider allowing a county to open back up. So right now, I'm monitoring that weekly, so I get a good idea of when the possibility, how far out are we from opening back up. And last week, the numbers started showing improvement, and this week they just took another dive. So I was originally projecting, maybe a 3-week closure after they close us, but we're already in week 3. I'm looking at another 3 to 4 weeks of being closed, I think.
Oh gosh. And when you did reopen, even though it was just for a few days, what were sales like in comparison to what they were same time last year?
Oh, sales were surprising. They were very good.
Oh, nice.
Oh my gosh.
Excited to be able to like go back and like sick of mac and cheese at home. I know I was.
I think, and another thing that fueled it is, if you're out in the mall shopping, you buy one Cinnabon, then that's kind of what you'll do. In a lot of places have a little place either right in the store or in a nearby food court or someplace to sit down. All those have been closed. So we saw a big increase in the number of packs. We were selling 6 packs and 15 packs of the mini bonds, which are higher priced. So that fueled a lot of the growth there. Plus, before maybe 6 months prior to the shutdown, we had put a big push on 3PD, third-party deliveries, Grubhub and Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, those things. And we had gotten to where we had built up that all 4 of those platforms were in operations in the stores. So we were doing 3.5% to 4% of sales overall. All of a sudden that shoots up to 11 to 12% of sales. So we had quite an upsurge from the third-party delivery platforms. One store was crazy because we charge a lot of money because we get charged high commission rates. One store was doing 37% in third-party delivery. It was like, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, 30%, 37% of their sales were through delivery. That's
unbelievable. And those prices are kind of crazy. But that and the pack sales, transactions were down, but not down as much as I thought, because we're operating on about 27% less hours being open. And those hours between 7 and 9 previously, when people are off work and can go to malls, were critical times for us. Those were our 2 busiest hours of the day. And all of a sudden those are gone. So I'm not surprised that transactions were down, but they weren't down as much as I thought. I think maybe 14, 15%, if I remember correct, from the before when we just reopened. But sales were up in some of the places like 15 to 30%.
Oh wow, that's great.
And some of the stores that opened first, we didn't open them all at once because everything opened up a little bit gradually and we had to kind of stage it. But we opened them all after about, I think it was over a 2-week period, we opened them all up. And so some of the stores that were open first started to show some decline in those crazy numbers, but it was still pretty healthy. So the sales really weren't the issue. The transactions was concerning, but given all the considerations, it was kind of expected. But they weren't down as much as I thought. But our sales were doing very well.
And when you think about the different delivery partners, do you happen to know offhand which have the best sort of margins or service for you? You know, if you had to sort of say like
I think they're all pretty high. Usually around the 23%. I think Postmates was the least expensive, which I think was 19%.
So that means like 19% of the order goes to Postmates for doing the delivery.
Yeah, so we charge a premium for those third-party deliveries. It's about I think 15. I forget the exact number we came up with. A little over 15% more than what we charge in the store.
Got it. Makes sense. And just going to knock out these last 2 questions. What are your thoughts on hiring via video interviews?
That's something I haven't done, but some of my managers have done it because they're much, obviously, from the amount of time it took me to get set up, you can see they're much better at this
now you're
stuff
good.
than I am. And they started doing that, and I don't have any results yet on that. They seem to be able to do it, but as far as any definitive numbers or anything, I don't. It's kind of been so new to us, but something definitely that once everything settles down, we're going to pursue.
That's awesome. And then another question, final question, and then we can get going. It's gone for an hour. Final question. Where do you stay up to date on industry news? Like, where do you go to for magazines, newsletters, podcasts, forums? Like, how do you stay up to know, like, this is what, is trending right now for QSRs or in your own?
Before the shutdown, I really didn't have much time to stay up on that. We had so many things going and so many initiatives in the store, especially around marketing and local marketing and marketing within the malls. We've done quite a bit on that, and really focusing on the service end of it. And we saw some remarkable improvement in our service rankings because of those initiatives. So I hadn't had as much time as I have recently because there's now a plethora of webinars available, and most of them are selling something. But I have done most of that through webinars. In the old days, there was really just basically one for our industry, QSR magazine, and that was a free subscription. So you got that every month and you read through it and you kept up to date with that. But right now it's been mainly online stuff, webinars, and I don't know how they'll get my name, but somebody's giving it to them because I get a ton of them. So during those 3 months we were off, I did watch a lot of webinars.
Were there any that stuck out to you as being really helpful? We can definitely improve. So.
I think there was a couple that I remember. It wasn't a lot of new stuff. It was basically people rehashing the same old stuff that have always been the basics of our industry. There's a lot of people that are touting technology and this and that, and most of the stuff in my early days when tech stuff was quite new back in the 80s, I was very much on the forefront of that, and now it's just kind of gone faster than my feeble brain can grasp it. So luckily I have some sharp people that I've mentored, and they kind of tell me what's going on.
Well, I think you're doing great. But anyway, this has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. And it's been incredible just to learn from you and understand sort of how you're able to juggle all of these changes across hundreds of miles that you need to cover for your different businesses. But yeah,
I have a couple of people who, when I first started 4 years ago, and they showed some promise, and I've worked with them and developed them, and they've been very responsive. And we're talking people that when I started with them, they were making $13 an hour, and now I'm paying them $60,000 a year. But they've been really the people that have allowed me to do it. They're the ones that I rely on, and it just goes back to really being able to develop some kind of relationship with your key members.
Yeah, something that's
I couldn't do it without these people.
Something that always sticks with me when chatting with owners, operators, and people like VP of operations, people like yourself, is they say, like, they're not in the food business, they're in the people business.
So true. I once saw in one of my flights, Southwest, which I think is a great airline.
Yeah.
I saw the guy I like to read the CEO's article when I get on a plane, and he says, we're in the people business. We just happen to fly airplanes.
Yeah, I love it. Well, also Southwest, their ticker price on the stock market is LUV. So that's always it's really fun. Yeah, I'm always like, LUV. Okay, stop. It's hilarious. Well, do you want to give a shout out to the people who have been key, just as a way to wrap this up?
Well, my right-hand guy is operations, Gus. He's up here. He's been with me through anything, and usually whenever I call Gus, and his two questions are, where do you need me and at what time? And then my right-hand gal, Kyra, she's just started out in operations, and now she handles so much administratively for me, and especially she's so quick with a lot of things that I'm not quick with anymore. And a couple managers who are coming up, my gal Karen, who's just been a real go-getter and is just phenomenal, and then an old-timer named Adriana, who continues to just run one of our best stores.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been incredible, and thank you to his extended team for sharing you for an hour to chat about this stuff. This is Lydia from Workstream, and this has been another great Wednesday webinar. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.
Bye.